menos un organismo y un laboratorio, se debe aceptar la declaración de conformidad del proveedor, ¿sí? Sin embargo, la declaración de conformidad del proveedor debe estar sustentada técnicamente con diferentes tipos de documentos que avalen esta certificación. Dentro de los reglamentos técnicos o los proyectos o los procedimientos de evaluación de la conformidad que el Ecuador emite, establecen cuáles son esas opciones que sustenten a la declaración. Una de esas es los informes de ensayo que pueden ser emitidos por un fabricante que tiene un laboratorio acreditado, un laboratorio de tercera parte o un laboratorio ya reconocido o competente que garantice el cumplimiento de los ensayos. Y bajo esas consideraciones, o pueden ser también, dependiendo de los requisitos, informes de inspección, con esa información, el declarante, ¿sí? Que puede ser el importador, el comercializador, el fabricante, emite la declaración de conformidad del proveedor, ¿sí? Teniendo en cuenta que la declaración de conformidad del proveedor siempre genera un mayor riesgo que una certificación y por ende también hay que tenerlo en cuenta en los procedimientos de control y vigilancia de mercado. Es decir, cuando un producto o una empresa tiene una declaración de conformidad de proveedor, el ente de control es a ese tipo de productos que debe generar un mayor control, ¿sí? A diferencia de tener unas certificaciones de tercera parte, ¿sí? El Ecuador ha aceptado la declaración, siempre enmarcada en la norma ISO IEC 17050, parte 1, en donde nos muestra el contenido que debe tener la declaración. Y obviamente acompañado de los informes y documentos que respalden dicha declaración. Es así que también en cuanto a política pública, también el Ecuador en algunos acuerdos comerciales ha aceptado la declaración como un mecanismo de evaluación de la conformidad apto para la demostración de los requisitos en el Ecuador. Hasta ahí una breve presentación. No sé si tengan preguntas.
Muchas gracias, Daniel. We're gonna continue with the next speakers, and then we'll get back to you with in another segment and possibly with questions from the floor. So thank you very much for your explanation. Now I would like to move here to the speakers in the room and invite Ciriel to share your experience or your perspective from the EU. Thank you.
Thank you. So while the EU is not directly responsible for performing risk assessments, within our legislation, we have created different forums of discussion when we rely on the advice of experts to discuss matters of risk assessment, such as Commission expert groups, market surveillance coordination group, and notified body groups. And those groups, they often issue non-legally binding guidelines and best practices, which can be used by anyone. So, for example, we have the PPE regulation guideline, in which you can find an example, a guide for the categorization of PPE, personal protective equipment, depending on the risk against which this product protects. And depending on that categories of product, then you will have different applicable conformity assessments. Another example, for example, in which we try to adapt conformity assessment depending on the potential risk of a product, is the new machinery regulation, which will soon replace the machinery directive. And in that machinery regulation, the required conformity assessment for specific product can be adapted based on accident data provided by member states. So on that basis, when we receive those data on whether there was accident on particular product, we need to have an analysis, and we can make a decision to amend our legislation to change a product from a category to another, which will influence whether a first-party conformity assessment is allowed under certain condition or not. So this is this is scientific evidence on which we base our decision, and which allow to be as close as possible to the reality. For example, in machinery, we have different product category. For example, woodworking machines, if we receive potential evidence that there is actually a lot of more incidents than we believe, then we will change that from category to another. Another example as well is that when we are evaluating our legislation, we are always trying to conduct a study, and on that basis, we always discuss the conformity assessment and product risk assessment.
Thank you very much, Cyril. And also thank you for allowing me to be a good timekeeper. I will now move on to Junweng. If you please can address this same question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. I will take my topic, China roads system, as an example. China road system is designed to limit the amount of harmful substance used in electronic and electrical products. Relevant suppliers can gain market access through self-declaration. So it can be concluded that we consider the management of harmful substances in electronic and electrical products is low risk. Of course, low risk refers to a classification in the context of management rather than absolutely safety and risk-free status. The criteria for determination mainly included three aspects. Firstly, is maturity of materials and technology. The 6 types of harmful substances, such as lead, mercury, regulated by road system, have been widely recognized and studied in the electronic and electrical appliance industry for over several decades. For many product categories, like household appliance, their material composition, production processes, and supply chain have completed the green transformation. And of course, here we can see that it's a very confident system. Second aspect is standardization of product types. The design, production, and components of a large number of consumers' electronics are highly standardized. So we can treat all these products quite the same. The third aspect is traceability in supply chain management. For large enterprises, of course, many electronic and electrical appliances are made by large enterprises that have established a comprehensive supply chain management system. Their bill of materials is clear and supplier audits are rigorous. This systematic management capability itself significantly reduces risk. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Junweng. And I appreciate all 4 speakers for their really respecting the time. So this is very, very much appreciated. At this point, I would like to know if between the speakers, you would like to maybe react to each other's responses, or even from the floor, if we have any questions or comments. I'm happy to open up the floor at this point. But so far, I think we can highlight the importance of definitions. We've spoken about definitions. We've spoken the importance of how risk is defined based on science and data, and also the importance of design of this conformity assessment procedures, as well as regulatory cooperation, I believe was somehow incorporated in this discussion. But if there are any reactions from the speakers or from the floor, please let me know. Show a flag. Or online, raise your hand, Stephanie or Danielle, if you want to come in. Okay, so this is running smoothly. Then I guess we can move on to segment 2 of the session. And in this part of the session, I would like to delve into how members use first-party conformity assessment. So before turning to our speakers, I would like to first invite the audience to answer a few questions on this topic via Mentimeter. Here I'm going to be completely honest, and for me, this is the first time I use this system. So I feel very old, and I really encourage you to please give it a shot. You can either scan the QR, and you can start answering with the first word that comes to your mind. We're gonna give it a minute per question. It's just 3 questions. And then on the screen, we will start seeing exactly your answers. So what's the name of this cloud? A cloud what?
Word cloud.
Word cloud. So you can see how old I am. So here we can start getting some takeaways of how you believe for this first question on for which product groups is first-party conformity assessment typically used. Here's what from the floor and even online, for those online, you can participate as well. This is great. Look at that. Okay, so I see that answers keep coming. I'm gonna give it like 30 more seconds. Okay. The link is also shared in the chat for those that are connected via Zoom. And I understand that if you also enter menti.com and you enter that number, it will direct you to the question. Okay, so maybe we can move on to the second question. Did you take a picture? Same here, same exercise. Let's give it a minute to see how it shows in the end. So here it's interesting how you can see how trust and lack of trust are like the largest responses. Now confidence comes in for what are the main challenges on using first-party conformity assessment. Yeah, it's very interesting how you can see confidence, trust, lack of trust, safety, assurance. Okay, thank you. And market surveillance is also showing up. Cool. Okay, so maybe we can move to the third and last question, which is what are the main benefits of using first-party conformity assessment for lower risk products? And maybe you can give it a shot. And that would be my part of the experiment for this morning. And here, of course, low cost, reduced business burden, agility, cost reduction, availability to market, cheaper, trade facilitation. That's a very important one. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for participating. It was a very cool experience for me. So, and thank you for the secretariat as well for, proposing this. It's a very cool exercise. So with those that feedback that we just heard from you, I would like to now hear the views of our speakers in terms of the benefits and potential risks of using first-party conformity assessment for low-risk products. Where possible, I would like to ask our speakers to share their insights from the private sector experience. So let's start from the room now. Cirial, would you like to go ahead first? 3 minutes, if possible. Thank you.
I think there is clearly a lot of benefits to the use of third-party conformity assessment, like we saw. Yeah, it's been used for many years actually in the EU. And what we saw that the health and safety of consumer actually can be adequately protected by that type of conformity assessment when it is applied in conjunction with the system of market surveillance, which will act as a balance to mitigate any issue that could arise. And I think that's also a very important thing. In the EU legislation as well, we have a system of voluntary harmonized standards, which helps to address any relevant risk that could be happening, and also that also helps manufacturer to provide some kind of presumption of conformity with our legislation. And this really also helps for, at the same time, innovation. And on that basis and on the use of harmonized standards, certain products will be subject to only self-declaration of conformity instead of third-party conformity assessment. So this is also very useful. One of the big benefits, I think, that we also saw it on the Menti is that obviously there is a lot of cost and time benefits, both for manufacturers and consumers, because if the manufacturer doesn't have to go through an expensive third-party conformity assessment, then the price of the product might also be lower for the consumers. And there is also a clear help in facilitating trade and free circulation of those products on the globalized markets. But all of this, there has to be balanced also with the potential risk, because there's still potential risk to the health and safety of the users. And that's why it's very important that in case of failures, we have some kind of safeguards, whether it's, market surveillance or just also the responsibility of the manufacturer. And this also is important to be mostly focused on the low-risk product that we know that in case of failure might not endanger the life fully of a person, but obviously also depends on media or other things. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Cyrielle, for your feedback. Now I'll turn to Junwen, if you please, for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think from the perspective of the private sectors, the first-party conformity assessment, like self-declaration, is a double-edged sword that offers both significant opportunities and severe challenges. Of course, for benefits, firstly, it will significantly reduce direct compliance costs and accelerate the time to market. Secondly, it will enhance dominance and flexibility of supply chain management without the meeting with certification bodies. Thirdly, it will facilitate enterprises in transforming compliance into their internal core competitiveness and brand assets. And however, it also creates a high-pressure environment where any shortcomings in capabilities or management can turn into huge commercial and legal risks. Therefore, choosing self-declaration is not simply about saving money and time, but rather a deep test of an enterprise's comprehensive management capabilities. Its success depends on whether the enterprise truly regards it as a strategic, systematic project to build. Thank you.
Thank you, Junwen. And with both these interventions, I think we have also it makes a good segue for the afternoon's session on market surveillance as well. But also, Junwen, thank you for bringing up the potential challenges. So I'm gonna now go back to the speakers online, and if I may, I'll repeat the question for both Stephanie and Danielle. So what are the benefits and potential risks of using first-party conformity assessment for low-risk products? So the private sector's perspective is appreciated if possible. So thank you again. Stephanie, can you go ahead?
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna. So I'm going to talk about first party in terms of supplier's declaration of conformity, or SDOC. Fortunately, there is an international standard for SDOC, ISO IEC 17050, and it specifies general requirements for a supplier's declaration of conformity, or SDOC. We saw the terms trust and confidence in the word cloud. Those are of concern, obviously, with this method. But I do think conformance of a manufacturer's SDOC to this standard should give regulatory authorities confidence to allow market entry with an SDOC, because it means the manufacturer or supplier has undertaken the required testing, is issuing a legal attestation of conformity, and is maintaining a compliance folder and dossier. And a little later, I'll get more into details on that. But we do see some advantages to SDoc for both companies and government based on what I saw in the word cloud again. These are not likely to be surprises, but I'll go ahead and go over them anyway. From a manufacturer perspective, it provides great flexibility in where a product is tested, and it reduces uncertainty and cost associated with mandatory testing in designated labs, if that's ever a requirement. For regulators, we believe that SDoc can be a cost-saving and efficient tool to meet their legitimate policy objectives, such as ensuring protection of consumer health and safety. We also think that it provides assurance that a product conforms to regulatory requirements by identifying an accountable party in case of any noncompliance. And then for economies and markets, we think SDoc mitigates technical barriers to trade by facilitating market entry. With an SDoc system, the proof of conformance is the responsibility of the supplier. As a result, it eliminates the perception of any perception of discrimination on the basis of location of testing or conformity assessment bodies. It also transforms the conformity assessment from a gatekeeping system to a compliance accountability system, which lowers trade barriers. And it enables governments to direct resources to higher risk products that need more detailed regulatory attention from the regulatory agency. While at the same time, it eliminates redundant testing and certification that add cost and slow the entry of low-risk technologies into the market. So in summary, we believe that SDoc, coupled with effective post-market surveillance, is appropriate for the technology sector, and we think it is an effective tool that can ensure regulatory objectives are being met while optimizing consumer access to safe, low-risk technologies by lowering trade barriers. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And now I would like to turn to Daniel. Daniel, si podés hablarnos sobre beneficios y potenciales riesgos de utilizar conformity assessment para primera parte. Gracias.
Gracias también. Y yo quisiera hablar más bien de desafíos que se tiene cuando se implementa la declaración de primera parte. El primero es romper la barrera de la confianza, ¿sí? Es lo primero que se debe tener cuando se tiene una declaración de primera parte, es tener confianza entre el regulado y el regulador, entre el Estado y el privado, donde si hay esa confianza, una declaración de conformidad de primera parte funciona muy bien dentro de la evaluación de la conformidad de la reglamentación técnica específicamente. Otro punto importante es la reducción de costos, ya se lo ha dicho, y creo que el acceso al mercado va de la mano con eso. Sí, a menor costos, más fácil llegar al mercado, más fácil llegar al usuario. Otro tema es la trazabilidad. La trazabilidad es un tema muy importante dentro de la declaración de primera parte, ¿sí? Ya que se debe garantizar tanto el que está declarando como el Estado, garantizar que todo producto que se esté comercializando y obviamente sea de bajo riesgo, tenga la trazabilidad de poder verificar en controles posteriores que realmente fue el producto que está declarándose de la conformidad. Sí, y por último, y ya lo mencioné, un desafío muy importante es la puntualización del control posterior. Es decir, cuando hay una declaración de conformidad, sabemos que el riesgo versus la certificación de tercera parte aumenta, ¿sí? Porque hay una probabilidad más alta de afectación a los objetivos legítimos y por ende el control tiene que ser más específico. Entonces, ese es un gran reto que tiene la parte gubernamental o los organismos de control sobre el verificar que los productos que han sido declarados por primera parte tengan o cumplan con todos los requisitos de evaluación de la conformidad y todos los requisitos de los reglamentos para garantizar así el bienestar de los usuarios, que es el objetivo de la reglamentación técnica.
Gracias, Daniel. I believe that what your answer also is very much reflecting the second question of the Menti exercise on trust, how trust between public and private parties is such a key element to address. So now I think that we've had a very useful general overview of our session, of our session's topic. And now I'm going to move to separate and more specific questions to each of the speakers, drawing from their own different expertise and experience in the area. So let me start. Now I'll go back online to Stephanie, if you allow me. So Stephanie, can you please share the US's experience using suppliers' declaration on conformity for low-risk products, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna. So yeah, a trade of technology products is especially affected by conformity assessment requirements because these products typically are designed for the global market, have a large number of components, and they rely on global supply chains. The products are constantly evolving in response to user demands and technological advances. They're deployed in a wide and diverse array of scenarios and sectors, everywhere from consumer to your refrigerator to medical devices. They're highly configurable. So one product family, a cell phone or a keyboard, could have hundreds of different configurations. If we look at regulatory regimes that encompass three areas: safety, electromagnetic compatibility, also known as EMC, and telecom approvals, we're looking at more than 80 countries that have product regulations with those three aspects. If we look at those countries who are focused just on telecom and EMC, it's closer to 180 different jurisdictions. So from our point of view, anything that can make conformity assessment more efficient is a very good thing from the tech sector and trade point of view. So I'll get a little more specific here about how our members experience conformity assessment in various areas. Several countries or economic zones have incorporated SDOC with post-market surveillance into their good regulatory practice, including Canada, EU, Australia, New Zealand, and in the US, it's a little more targeted and sector specific in the US. And we find these regulatory schemes to be very trade friendly because they conduct efficient and effective surveillance and enforcement, and therefore this is a very desirable structure for the technology industry. So in these, I'm going to get very specific here. In these schemes, generally, there may be some differences among them, but generally supporting SDOC documentation requirements include several items. You're going to have a completed and signed declaration of conformity according to ISO IEC 17050. That's the standard I mentioned earlier, part 1. A product description, at least one test report, and depending on the scheme, that could be from an accredited lab or the manufacturer's lab. If there are any variants of the product, there needs to be a signed statement that all variations comply, might be called a declaration of similarity, and that would have to be updated anytime a product changes. Now, ISO IEC 17050 Part 2 identifies a stack of additional supporting documentation. So we're looking at product identification, such as name, model, version, and so forth, identification of specific requirements, which is going to be a list of applicable standards, regulations, and specifications, the conformity assessment method to be used, that was used, evidence of conformity, and this is going to include very technical information like test reports, measurement results, calculations and or engineering analyses, certification reports if a third party tested, and then sometimes also quality systems records. Now, all of those items have to be in sufficient detail and traceable to any product version that was declared in Part 1. And you also have to include change control documentation if, for example, there are firmware or hardware revisions. Now, all of that stuff that I just listed goes into the compliance file, which would be maintained by the manufacturer for a period of time. 5 years is pretty typical. And this must be made available to the compliance agency upon request. We find typically 30 working days is given to provide that file. Ideally, the manufacturer can hold this documentation electronically and provide it electronically, but of course, it could be printed when and if it's required. Now, if we go back to those numbers I mentioned earlier, anywhere from 80 to 180 schemes, hopefully it's obvious why SDoc is preferable from the tech sector point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for this very detailed answer. And definitely regulatory regimes and the different ones that exist are definitely one of those big challenges. But to go more in detail from what you have shared, there was a joint meeting last November between the TBT committee and the ITA committee, where the ITAC's guidelines on CAP for EMC and EMI were discussed. And they recommend the use of first-party conformity assessment. So this is a cross-fertilization, a cross-pollination between the committees here at the WTO, between the TBT committee and other bodies. So this is an example of such. Now, allow me to move on to Danielle online as well. And Danielle, very specifically, can you please share Ecuador's experience with using suppliers' declaration of conformity as a valid option for conformity assessment?
Sí, correcto. Bueno, en el Ecuador es muy usada la declaración de conformidad del proveedor. Primero, tenemos que recordar que la usamos siempre bajo la norma ISO IEC 17050, parte 1, en donde la declaración tiene que venir verificada o analizada por cada una de las autoridades que, que la reciben, ¿sí? Entonces, es la autoridad quien debe decidir en el Ecuador si la regulación permite o no la declaración de conformidad para el Ecuador. Sí, entendiendo que la declaración o este tipo de evaluación de la conformidad se basa en un principio de buena fe. Sin embargo, en el Ecuador es indispensable que esta declaración esté legalizada. ¿Qué quiere decir? Que debe haber una firma de responsabilidad tanto del declarante como un reconocimiento de esta declaración por autoridades legales. ¿Eso qué permite? Permite que en caso de mentir o en caso de fallar en la declaración, tenga consecuencias legales dentro de la legislación ecuatoriana. Segundo, la declaración debe ser emitido o sustentada con inspecciones o documentos de evaluación. Es decir, toda declaración que se recibe o se verifica en el Ecuador, ¿sí? Tiene que tener un sustento técnico detrás. ¿Cuáles son esos sustentos? Informes de ensayo, inspecciones que se han hecho a los productos, ensayos rutinarios, ensayos iniciales, en donde se ha demostrado que el producto cumple con las prescripciones establecidas en el reglamento técnico. ¿Sí? En este caso, en el Ecuador, las inspecciones o los informes de ensayo son aceptados siempre y cuando sean emitidos por laboratorios, ¿sí? Ya sean laboratorios del fabricante, ya sean laboratorios de tercera parte, pero estos laboratorios deben tener competencia técnica. ¿sí? Es decir, demostrar que cumplen con la normativa ISO y EC 17025, que corresponde a la competencia de laboratorios. Eso permite que se vaya fortaleciendo la declaración de conformidad del proveedor, ¿sí? En la revisión o en la verificación ya en mercado. La declaración, el declarante es el que se responsabiliza de haber realizado estas inspecciones o estos ensayos o estas verificaciones de cumplimiento, ¿sí? Y es así que le permite que en la declaración, dentro de la 17050, describa el producto o las familias y tener en cuenta también que la declaración es para ese grupo o familia inspeccionado y documentado, ¿sí? mm, mm, Debe tener también dentro de la evaluación para el Ecuador la trazabilidad que ya lo había mencionado. Eh, es decir, en la declaración debe constar lotes, debe tener constar fechas de fabricación, debe constar información que permita al ente de control en el Ecuador dar esa trazabilidad que permite que garantice el cumplimiento del producto que se está comercializando, ¿sí? Y por último, obviamente no reemplaza una certificación de tercera parte, la declaración. Sin embargo, sí, ayuda o coayuda a la facilitación del comercio, y es así que existen reglamentos técnicos en el Ecuador que, pese a que existen muchos organismos de certificación, se mantiene la declaración porque es una forma de facilitar el comercio, facilitar el cumplimiento, permitir el ingreso de productos fabricados en el exterior y con eso además garantizar el cumplimiento de la reglamentación técnica eh, en el Ecuador.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for also the very specific explanation that you gave us. And now I'd like to turn to Jun Weng, and I would like to ask you to please introduce us to China's self-declaration model, exploration, and how it is used for low-risk products, please.
Okay, thank you. I will use 5 pages of slides to give a short presentation. And mostly, I do not need to read all the words here, so you can just see what's on slides. All right, thank you. So the China exploration of self-declaration is in the China rules system. As I mentioned before, this system is to limit the harmful substances used in electrical supplies. All right, so the Chinese rules conformity assessment system was released on the year 2019. It sets market access requirement for products. The methods of conformity assessment include the voluntary productification and the supplier's self-conformity declaration. So we have 2 ways. The use of 2 ways is if the suppliers do not understand how to manage their supply chain, their materials, so they can ask certification bodies for help. If they can do the work by themselves, they can use self-conformity declaration to just reduce cost and time. So, considering the topic of today, I will mainly introduce the self-declaration method. This is a conformity assessment activity where the product suppliers independently adopts a reasonable way to complete the conformity evaluation and reports that product's conformity on the public service platform. All right, so we have from the electrical and electronic products, we have 2 aspects. Products not listed in the management catalog. If the product does not contain harmful substances, just use the little e mark. If have, and just limit in standards, so they use this product contains harmful substances, use the year. Okay, the 10 means the year. All right, if the product listed in management catalog, we can use CGP at the right of the slides. CGP means China Green Product here. use that mark. That means less electronic and electrical products get the RoHS mark. Okay, how to make this self-declaration? The content and process requirements of the supplier's declaration are as follows. After completing the conformity evaluation of the product, supplier shall, in accordance with the supplier conformity declaration rules for the restriction of the use of hazardous substances in electrical and electronic products, submit the corresponding product conformity information. The supplier shall be responsible for the authenticity, completeness, consistency of the self-declaration and related technical supporting documents, and make an open commitment to accept the supervision of all parties in society. The content of the supplier's declaration includes the conformity information of the product meeting, the harmful substance limit requirements, and related technical supporting documents. The supplier shall complete submission of self-declaration within 30 days after the product is launched on market. All right, till now, the product suppliers can independently choose the RoHS qualification assessment methods that suits their own conditions and needs. This not only conforms to international practices, but also establish a flexible system. The China RoHS Public Service Platform provides more convenient and efficient services for enterprises and certification institutions. Enterprises can submit product complaints information at any time and in a quick and easy manner, shorten the new product launch cycle. At the end of last year, 2025, nearly 1,500 enterprises in China have uploaded over 20,000 conformity declarations from suppliers, covering 32,000 types of electrical and electronic products. Further, the self-declaration of China RoHS suppliers will continue to be implemented and improved. Constantly organize activities to promote, interpret, and popularize the policies, regulations, and standards of China RoHS, and urge enterprises to fulfill the relevant requirements of China RoHS, just to escape from what we mentioned before of the risks. Okay, strengthen post-process, and after-sales supervision, and enhance application of new generation information technologies, such as artificial intelligence and big data in after-sales supervision to improve the accuracy of supervision. And also, we have to strengthen international cooperation and exchanges, draw on advanced experiences from developed countries and regions, and effectively enhance the management level of China RoHS. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Junweng. This was very illustrative, and I appreciate also you following us through this explanation. Now, I'd like to move on to CDL, and I know that you've already touched upon a few of these elements, but can you explain a bit further how first-party conformity assessment is used in the European Union for products such as machinery, radio equipment, electrical and electronic equipment, and PPE, as you already had spoken about? Thank you.
Thank you. So first-party conformity assessment is widely used for those products. They are covered by several legislation, such as the Machinery Directive and Regulation, the Radio Equipment Directive, the EMCD Directive, Low Voltage Directive, and the PP Regulation. So when it comes to electrical equipment under the scope of the Low Voltage Directive and EMCD, there is no third-party conformity assessment, meaning that it's self-declaration of conformity, unless those products are covered also by other legislation which mandate them. On the other side, for radio equipment and machinery, the conformity assessment procedure might depend on the aspect it aims to cover and the use of voluntary harmonized standards. So for example, for radio equipment, the EMCD aspects are covered by first-party conformity assessment, while the radio aspects are covered by third-party conformity assessment if there is no relevant EU harmonized standards that exist or that have been applied. For machinery, on the other hand, the conformity assessment depends on the level of potential risk of the machine. So under the new machine regulation, which will apply in 2027, the products are divided in 3 categories. The first category, which we call Annex 1 Part A's, are machines that are considered to be potentially dangerous if there is a failure. So for example, it will be safety components that are embedding some AI systems, and those particular machines will always be subject to third-party conformity assessment. On the other end, for products that we call Part B Annex 1, which are also considered as potentially risky, but not as much, then the third-party conformity assessment only need to be performed when no harmonized standards or common specification covering all of the technical requirements have been applied or exist. So, for example, those machines would be sewing machine or woodworking machines. And we can change the categories of product depending on the extent of data that I talked in my first reply. And for the rest of the product that are covered by machinery, it's first-party conformity assessment that is accepted, insofar as there's no other EU legislation that could apply to that same product for which they might have another type of conformity assessment for different aspects. And as regard PPE, which is a different sector, it's less, it's completely different, but the same idea applies. So the product, they are categorized by according to the risk against which they are supposed to protect. So the more the risk can endanger the life of the users, the more stringent the conformity assessment. So for example, their product are therefore classified in 3 categories. Category 1, which is for the lesser risk. So for example, contact with the surface under 50 degrees. There is no third-party conformity assessment that is necessary. It's a self-declaration of conformity. For category 3, which are the more stringent and more dangerous risk, which can actually really endanger the life of someone. So for example, it would be firefighter suits. It would be, something like fire, hazardous agents, drowning, those kind of things. Then there is a third-party conformity assessment that is mandatory with a more stringent thing, because we also include there a production control, which is necessary. Where for category 2, which are the products that are in between the two, then it's just a third-party conformity assessment without production control that is mandatory. So yes, it depends really. We really have 2 types of, let's say, legislation. One that is based also on the use of potential harmonized standards, which are voluntary but still useful, and other that are also based on the risk. And sometimes, like in machinery, we have the 2 layers. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Cyril, because you've brought a very important element here, and it is the proportionality of the risk and the cap. So thank you for bringing that up. Now, I would like to see if there are any reactions from the floor or online or even between our own speakers, if you want to address any of the issues that your colleagues have touched upon. And I see already some flags coming up, so thank you. I see Costa Rica. You have the floor.
Sí, muchas gracias y muchas gracias a los expositores. En Costa Rica en realidad pues tenemos poca experiencia con este mecanismo, pero es algo que queremos explorar bastante. Siempre estamos buscando la forma de cómo poder facilitar el comercio a las importaciones de productos en el país. Una de las preguntas, tengo también a algunas autoridades conectadas online. Alguna de las preguntas va relacionada con, por ejemplo, si un producto, si han tenido la experiencia o si algún país o de los exponentes, tal vez, no sé, por parte de la Unión Europea, por ejemplo, mencionaron que un producto podría, depende de la información que pueda brindar el productor, podría pasar de una categoría a otra, pero si a nivel de vigilancia del mercado han encontrado que un producto tal vez tenga un riesgo menor y por esa misma vigilancia del mercado han pasado o cambiado de categoría a un producto para que pueda utilizar la declaración de primera parte. Y otra de las preguntas o desafíos que también tenemos, y tal vez no sé si el exponente de Ecuador lo mencionó, pero tal vez cómo lograron o en qué ámbitos, para qué productos aceptan la declaración de la conformidad de primera parte, y cómo han logrado que las instituciones pierdan ese miedo, puedan tener esa confianza. Y vuelvo al ejemplo, digamos, en Costa Rica, de que existe todavía ese temor con este tipo de mecanismo. La vigilancia del mercado se necesita reforzar. Han mencionado mucho la vigilancia del mercado, pero ¿cómo lograr esa pérdida del miedo, digamos, de las autoridades competentes? Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Costa Rica. Gracias, Federico. Do I see any other flags from the floor? Any flags online? Switzerland? Is that you? Yeah. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for the excellent presentation. Just to follow up on the question from Costa Rica, indeed, as much as we agree probably in this room of the trade facilitating aspects of first-party declaration, suppliers' declaration of conformity, we hear from the national regulators how do we enforce that, and we understand sometimes it is necessary to have some sort of representation within the jurisdiction of the importing party to interact with market surveillance authorities when there are suspicion or where there are doubts or when there are questions arising with the conformity of the products with the technical requirements. And then there as well, for low risk products, there is probably a difference in the responsibilities undertaken by the manufacturer outside the country, outside the jurisdiction of the regulators, and responsibilities undertaken by the representative within the jurisdiction. And how, just a question, how do we find an approach that would still ensure that possibility of interaction with market surveillance authorities without putting the whole burden or the whole responsibility for low-risk products on that representative, because probably he's not in a position to take the full responsibility?
Thank you very much to the representative of Switzerland. Maybe I can give the chance to the speakers to address these questions. So I don't know, Ciriel, would you like to address the first part of Costa Rica's question? And then I'd like to give the floor to Ecuador. And I don't know if you can jump in, either Stephanie or Junwen, to complement.
Sure. Thank you for your question. So when it comes to the market surveillance, whether the product is supposed to be a self-declaration conformity or going through a third-party conformity assessment, it shouldn't affect the market surveillance activities as such, because those are different, let's say, risk. On one hand, you have products that have gone through a third-party conformity assessment, but if they fail, even with a third-party conformity assessment, it can really endanger the life of the users, and therefore they also have to focus on this because the risks are higher, let's say. But for the low risk products, which are self-declared, still it's important to check them, because even if the risk might be less to the safety of the user, there can still be not following the legal requirement that we have, for example, in the EU. So, and those legal requirements, they're also made to protect. So it shouldn't be a difference between low risk product, let's say, and higher risk one in terms of market surveillance.
Thank you, Ciriel. Daniel, would you like to take the specific question addressed to you, please?
Sí, bueno, En el Ecuador dividimos los reglamentos técnicos, digamos, en función de las competencias de cada sector. Entonces, si hablamos de medidas sanitarias y fitosanitarias, obviamente eso está regulado o establecido dentro de cada ente de control la aceptación de los productos de primera parte. ¿Sí? Por ejemplo, en temas de alimentos, nace de una declaración sanitaria y obviamente es una declaración del interesado de primera parte. ¿Sí? Entonces, en ese tipo de productos ya se acepta la declaración del proveedor como parte de la evaluación del cumplimiento. También hay otros dentro del OTC, como productos de eficiencia energética, productos eléctricos de seguridad eléctrica, que obviamente por sus características permiten que se pueda aceptar la declaración de primera parte. Este tipo de productos en el Ecuador están se permite la declaración de conformidad de primera parte, sí, teniendo en cuenta de que cada reglamento técnico en el Ecuador establece sus propios mecanismos y dependiendo del riesgo, como ya lo hemos comentado, a mayor riesgo, más bien dicho, a menor riesgo, hay una posibilidad de usar la declaración de conformidad de primera parte. Además de que en cuanto a vigilancia, estos productos son los que generan o necesitan mayor identificación dentro del mercado. Es decir, cuando una tercera parte de evaluación de la conformidad, es decir, emitido un certificado bajo cualquier esquema 17067, eh, el riesgo se reduce en cuanto a control de mercado. Por ende, cuando hay solo una declaración, ese riesgo aumenta y es en donde se enfocan los organismos de control en hacer las vigilancias de control posterior.
Listo, muchas gracias, Daniel. And we were doing great on time, and now not so much. So I don't know if there's any further question. I don't know if the questions were properly addressed. Yeah. Okay. So how about we move to the last segment of the session so we can have a bit of an extra minute there to any additional Q&A. And I'm going to ask a final question to the speakers, and it's the same question to all four of them on how can the 2024 CAP guidelines support members' efforts in conducting risk assessment and effectively using first-party conformity assessment procedures. So to keep time right, I'll ask you to stay on 2 minutes. So this time I'm going to start with you, Jungwon, please.
Thank you for the question. I think after the release of the guidelines, it's essentially provided a public manual for all countries on how to professionally make their own self-declaration systems, reducing decision-making costs. Countries, sorry for my cough. Countries do not need to figure out the risk assessment evaluation processes on their own. They can directly refer to the guidelines to establish their own systems, and enhancing industry mutual trust. When all governments follow the same set of rules, they can believe or trust in other countries easily, and also preventing further risks. The system established by strictly followed guidelines itself, the best means to deal with risks. Thank you.
Thank you. That was super on time. Thank you. Ciriel, your turn, please.
We are very happy to have those guidelines, which we believe are key to ensure a level of common understanding. We live in a world where we have a lot of international trade, and therefore having common ground on conformity assessment is essential to good trust among partners. In particular, the guidance on the importance of having effective market surveillance and choosing the right conformity assessment is very important, as such market surveillance could really help mitigate any potential risk that could arise. Additionally, the use of international standard can really also help create some common practice, and it's really useful to have this guidance to guide the members here on how to choose their conformity assessment procedures.
Thank you. Now I think we're back on track with the time. Daniel, can we go online with you to address this question, please?
Gracias. Creo que dentro de el hecho de que ya las directrices consideren la declaración de conformidad de primera parte es un avance que ayuda a los gobiernos de cada uno de los países miembros a, a poder incluir con el respectivo análisis de riesgo la declaración de conformidad del proveedor, ¿sí? Ya que a veces es mal vista justamente por algunas implicaciones que puede tener, como la confianza, la trazabilidad. Sin embargo, si es bien llevada, si es manejada adecuadamente, se puede, como parte de los gobiernos, registrar, generar los mecanismos, herramientas digitales que permitan a los proveedores hacer sus propias declaraciones. es, eh, es un mecanismo muy válido y que esté considerado dentro de una guía que permite a nosotros como países miembros también mostrar hacia los regulados y también hacia los organismos de evaluación, que es un mecanismo válido y que más bien la fortaleza que creo que es la verificación por las propias empresas como buenas prácticas del cumplimiento de las regulaciones técnicas.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. And finally, Stephanie, I invite you to share your thoughts on the CAP guidelines, please.
Well, certainly. Thank you. Yeah, it's a great document, and I think WTO members could really use it to see where they can leverage the suggestions therein to gain a high level of regulatory assurance while minimizing technical barriers to trade and enhancing the ease of doing business and entry to their markets. In particular, I think the guidelines provide some very useful insights to help member countries focus their resources. For example, harmonization with international standards can allow governments to more quickly establish standards. Standards organizations have undertaken years of work with scores of experts to develop these standards by international consensus. And I think countries can leverage this work that's already been done. I think the guidelines can help governments have confidence that standards like ISO, IEC, 17050 for SDOC and others for testing, accreditation, and certification can ensure that they're meeting their regulatory objectives while minimizing technical barriers to trade. And then finally, to reiterate what I said earlier, the focus on real world risk is important. The guidelines give some really good details on assessing the nature and degree of risk and basing conformity assessment procedures on evidence. And these are all very important factors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Now, let me see if there are any questions from the floor. Any thoughts, reflections? Because I would like to ask maybe a final question to all four speakers or whomever wants to come in regarding liability and specifically on another tool to balance against less stringent and first-party conformity assessment procedures. Do you have any reflections, thoughts about the role of liability? I don't know if online or here in the room anyone wants to address this. If not, I'll throw a wild card. Stephanie, do you want to take this? Maybe. Okay, Ecuador. Thank you, Daniel. Go ahead.
Sí, creo que la responsabilidad es una línea muy fundamental dentro de la declaración. Recordemos, y como ya lo comenté, la declaración de primera parte nace de un acuerdo de buena fe entre las partes. ¿Y eso qué conlleva? Que tanto el organismo de control como el regulado tengan la responsabilidad compartida de garantizar que los productos que se comercializan cumplan con los requisitos. Recordando de que obviamente las declaraciones vienen de la mano con regulaciones, ¿sí? Entonces, si hay un riesgo que mitigar frente a un producto, es responsabilidad tanto del organismo de control como eh, el fabricante o importador, comercializador, haber constatado o haber preguntado que el producto cumple con la regulación de cada uno de los países. Entonces, y al final esa responsabilidad debe ser compartida desde el fabricante que puede estar en el exterior del producto que se está comercializando, como el mismo fabricante que está dentro del país. Entonces, es una responsabilidad compartida que se debe tener para garantizar los objetivos legítimos que buscan los reglamentos técnicos.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Daniel, for your feedback and your inputs. Maybe a final call for Q&A. Any questions from the floor or online before we start wrapping up? Nope. Any last comments from the speakers? Last chance? Nope. Okay. So I guess this brings us to the conclusion of this thematic session. First, I have a few thoughts I want to share with you. In terms of what we have listened and learned this morning, I believe that we can bring back that low risk products, first-party conformity assessment can be efficient and appropriate. That CAP guidelines definitely ensure regulatory clarity. I think that the role of transparency in CAP design is also something that we can highlight, because they definitely are enablers, facilitating trade, improving market access, improving regulatory efficiency, and also to benefit and protect the consumers, which in the end is the final objective. We have heard several definitions and terms here, like regulatory and international cooperation, harmonized standards, good faith, compliance, recognition, traceability, so market surveillance. All of these are elements that are necessary for a successful use of first-party conformity assessment. And if properly used, as mentioned, this first-party caps can help reduce costs, lower trade burdens, and of course, facilitate access to consumers and the markets. So I would like very much to thank everyone who has participated, the speakers, everyone online, delegates, everyone that's coming from capitals as well. Thank you so much for here and for your valuable insights and contributions. Also, thank you very much to Anastasia, Tam, Lauro. Thank you, team, for your support, the interpreters, of course. I would like to let you know that the Secretariat has prepared a very useful CAP fact sheet. It's online at the WTO Conformity Assessment website, but you'll find these hard copies at the back of the room. I think this is super useful, and those from Capital that can take a copy with you, it's a good read. And later this week, during the regular TBT committee meeting, I will be providing a brief report on this thematic session on agenda item 3B, Romanet 3. So a more detailed report from my side as moderator will be issued, along with the video recording of the session. I think it's also useful to go back to some of the specifics that we have discussed. Before I conclude, then, I want to take this opportunity to encourage you and join the UK side event, marking 2 years since the adoption of the CAP guidelines. And I think that we made fantastic time. Thank you so much for that, because the event starts at 1 o'clock in room D. That's at the 3rd floor. So thank you so much. Have a good lunch.